All right, good morning. Well, welcome to the 7 Steps to Master Your Warehouse webinar with me, Andrew Clark. Just a little brief bio about me. I've been working in warehousing and logistics for over 30 years. I started my corporate career with Baxter Healthcare and some other large players in the healthcare and pharmaceutical space. Then I went out consulting and contracting, and then eventually started my own logistics consulting business called Logistics Help, and recently started Logistics Cloud Co with the aim of developing a warehouse management system that was in the cloud that was suitable for small and medium businesses, and we'll probably add to other technology into that business as we move along. So we're going to focus today on how to run a warehouse. So I hope that you all find this very useful. I'm going to go through a lot of information very quickly. I will talk for about 30 or 40 minutes, and there will be plenty of time at the end for Q&A and discussion. So if there's only a few of us, then we'll just open up all the microphones and let everyone talk, and we'll have a good discussion. All right, now there we go. All right, so the thing that inspired this was I was trying to come up with a summary of all of the key elements of warehousing that were covered by this warehouse management system. And so I wrote this little infographic on the warehouse system, and I thought, well, you know what, this is actually a pretty good way to think about warehousing in general with these 7 key activities. So it seemed to make sense to me that I would add in create the webinar and talk about these things and use them as a springboard to talk more widely about warehousing. So our mission at Logistics Cloud Co is making advanced logistics optimization available to everyone. It's a bit of a grand goal, but I think that's it's a good goal to have. And really, we have started that process with coming up with a version of a warehouse management system that is going to work really well for a lot of businesses. The key points we're going to cover: receiving, moving, picking, replenishing, picking, packing. Oh, I have 8 points there because I've repeated pick twice. Receive, move, replenish, then pick, pack, ship, and count. Along the way, we'll cover some of these bonus points, and I've got a slide at the end where we'll talk about putting it together and just some thoughts around warehouse optimization that go a bit beyond these 7 key activities, because there is obviously more to running a warehouse than just a lot of the technical aspects that I'll be talking about in this presentation. So a couple of questions for you to think about is where you are at the moment in terms of your particular journey in your business. So where are you in the supply chain? I suspect that not many of you are primary producers, but you know, that is where it all starts. Everything that we have is either grown or is dug out of the ground and turned into something. If you're a manufacturer and you're using those sources of raw materials to turn into a manufactured good, then you'll have a certain kind of supply chain. So each one of these steps in the supply chain, the warehousing and logistics processes that those businesses have will look quite different. I mean, there's a massive difference if you take the railway systems and the stockpiles of, you know, like a coal or an iron ore miner or a dairy farmer. Their supply chains their logistics look incredibly different. If you're a manufacturer, you're making something, or if you're getting something manufactured for you, then you have a particular place in the supply chain where you will generally be shipping in bulk, you know, pallet loads and bulk quantities of products out to wholesalers, typically, or large retailers. So wholesalers are people who will aggregate a range of different products, and they'll have a large warehouse, and then they'll ship usually to a particular industry group or a particular type of retail store. Retailers, you know, the typical high street shop doesn't really have a warehouse or anything like that. But if you run a chain of stores, then you will probably be ending up with some sort of a warehouse operation and a replenishment process to replenish your stores. online retail is the thing that's really shaken up the retail industry over the last sort of decade or so, and that has grown massively. Online retail is direct distribution to customers. People order online and they get it. We all know what that is, but that is a massively different form of warehousing and distribution requirements, and is a lot harder than a lot of the traditional warehousing operations. The other category, which people don't tend to think about so much, is a service business that also has a warehouse. So this might be an events management business who has a warehouse full of tables and chairs and tablecloths and cutlery and ovens and things, or it can even be something like a university campus where there's a lot of stuff that comes into the university for distribution within the campus. Large hotel complexes, casinos, military bases, those are the sort of things where you get which essentially it's a service business because they're not shipping anything, but they have a warehouse that they need to manage. So on your warehouse journey, whereabouts are you? Are you outsourced? In which case, maybe you're thinking about insourcing if you're coming to a talk on warehousing. So a lot of people have outsourced and then brought their warehouses back in because they've been disappointed with either the cost or the service they've got from a 3PLs. But there are good reasons for outsourcing and a lot of good 3PLs out there. So sometimes it's just a question of finding the right fit. Maybe you're just starting out and you really don't have much of an idea about how to do warehousing. You're starting in your bedroom or your garage or a small factory unit, and you've got some stock and it's on pallets on the floor and a bit of shelving, and you're just kind of finding your way. Well, I hope you will get a lot out of this. Maybe you're growing because you've started a business that's really started to take off, but you're starting to run into trouble with the way your warehouse is operating. So hopefully you'll get a lot of ideas out of today. Maybe you have a mature business, been going for years, but it's dysfunctional, has always been dysfunctional because the warehouse has never really done for you, what you want it to do, but it sort of works well enough and you're just moving along. What can happen in those situations is that it puts a bit of a lid on your business, and so you can't grow, so you tend to get a bit stuck where you are. Maybe you run a mature business and things are okay, right? But you want to do it better. It's not dysfunctional. The customers are getting served, but maybe you want to grow the business and you realize that what you've got isn't going to scale up much more than what it is now. And lastly, hopefully some of you out there are absolutely killing it, and things are going well, but maybe you just want to get some ideas on where you might go next. So then there's what sort of systems and things that you're currently using. A lot of traditional businesses are using ERP systems of one sort or another, often on premises, but it could be in the cloud as well. If you've got a warehouse, maybe you've got a warehouse management system, or maybe your ERP has some warehouse management-like features within it. There's certainly a bunch of ERPs where they've crafted on a warehouse management system, or it has some functionality within it that is a bit like a warehouse management system. NetSuite would be one of the ones I would sort of put in that category. There are some features. There's a mobile application that allows you to do some transaction confirmations on a mobile gun and do some scanning. Maybe your business is pretty small and all you've got is, MYOB or Reckon or some sort of traditional PC accounting package, or you've gone to the cloud and you're now using Xero as your accounting, but you sort of operationally you just figure it out and you're using spreadsheets and bits of paper to actually run the operations of the business. If you're sort of a bit more advanced than that, you might have added in an inventory system onto your Xero system or QuickBooks system, such as Unleashed, Sin7 or Deer. They're all products that I've worked with. And that gives you a lot more functionality around the inventory management and a little bit of warehouse management like functionality as well. You might be an online retailer and you've got Xero and Shopify, and you're doing your fulfillment in Shopify or maybe in a freight system attached to that, like Starship It or Ship It, that gives you some functionality for doing order fulfillment. Or next level down, you've actually got Xero and Unleashed or Sin7 and Shopify, and you're managing the business like that because you've got complex inventory management needs, and so you need that system. Or you've got the full hog, the full ecosystem or tech stack of Xero, Unleash, Sin7, Deer, you know, one of those, plus Shopify and a warehouse management system as well. So fantastic if you're in that kind of category. So I am going to assume that if you're here and having a listen to this talk, that you may well be having some issues with your warehouse, and so I think this is really the root cause of the problems that a lot of small and medium businesses particularly face. So I drew up this graph because in order to get to a high performance warehouse or logistics operation, you need a combination of the right technology and infrastructure and the right kind of process and discipline within the business. So a lot of businesses, a lot of small and medium enterprises are kind of stuck down here. They often don't invest in great technology for their operations, and depending upon their maturity level, maybe their processes are not very sophisticated, or their discipline in executing those processes is not great. With corporations, they have the money, they'll invest in the technology. But again, the thing that can trap them is the discipline and the sophistication of the processes they use. They usually, even if their processes and their technology is basic, they're usually okay, and so they're moving in this direction. And then up the top here, really, you've got, you know, the Amazons and Walmarts of the world that are killing it. So this is where a lot of the expertise is around warehouse management and operations. And what tends to happen is the people that know what they're doing stay in this corporate world and don't tend to go and work for the small and medium enterprises. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of businesses struggle to get really good managers in the business and really good advice on their technology and their process improvement, which is kind of where I come in, because I've kind of come from that corporate world, and so I've set my sights on bringing that technology to smaller businesses. Okay, let's dive into the detail. So receiving. So typical receiving process, a truck rolls up, you get some stock off it, and you stage it on the floor, and it might be a mixed pallet, for example. You've got to sort it out and you've got to put it away. So you're going to get your invoice or delivery docket that comes with the goods, and you're going to count each item. You've got to spread it out so you can count it, unless you can count it on the pallet, but probably you've got to split it up to put it away. So you're going to count and tick, and then you're going to put that paperwork. Typically that will go into an office for someone to confirm onto the system at some point in future, or maybe you're the one who's going to do it. A lot of that depends on the scale of the business and how it's been, you know, structured. But traditionally, a lot of warehouse operations, they don't let the staff in the warehouse do their own system confirmation. So they're just handling paperwork, and then it goes into a tray and someone comes and does a confirmation for that later. So what that means is that they're going to be handling physical stock and moving it around in the warehouse, but the stock isn't actually available in the system until someone does that confirmation later. And then it's going to go off to the accounts payable system after it's been received in, and then that will get paid, and that process will, you know, the supplier gets paid. So I want to contrast that sort of process, that very traditional process, with what goes on with a warehouse management system, where same thing, trucks is going to back up and you're going to unload that stock. But the big change is that you've now got a mobile device in your hands with a barcode scanner and an application on that allows you to recognize the receipt of that stock as you are doing the physical process. So you can scan the items, you can go scan it, make sure you identify the correct item, enter in the quantity that you just received, and then put it on a pallet or put it on a trolley, however, totally depends upon the size and scale of the operation, but you're going to sort it ready for put away. And in that case, then the stock is going to be immediately confirmed into the host and then recognized, and you can then start to release those orders or take orders against that stock. So there's no time delays in the process, and then it's going to go into accounts payable. So with the warehouse system, what that's doing for you is giving you not just the real-time stock tracking and availability, but it's giving you the ability to do your system confirmations as you do the physical process. So that is not only more accurate, but it's much more timely and gives you a much more realistic picture of exactly what's going on. I know a lot of businesses where you have salespeople wandering around the receiving dock because they're waiting on something for a customer, and they're like, "Oh, it's here," and then they'll call the customer and say, "Hey, your stock's here. You know, we'll have it out to you today." Whereas the poor guys in the warehouse haven't even received it yet. Stock's not on the system, can't release the order. So, you know, and then you've got to go through a whole manual expediting process. Well, with a warehouse system, when you're tracking it in real time, you just don't have those sorts of issues. So sources of inbound stock in your warehouse: single purchase order delivery, multi-purchase order delivery. So single PO is the typical truck backing up and dropping off. You place your order, you get in all or part of that delivery, and then that's what you'll receive against, just a single PO. A multi-purchase order, which is often the case where suppliers don't supply in full, you're going to get maybe 2 or 3 or more purchase orders delivered on that, and you've got to go and check off and make sure that you identify which items are being received against which purchase order. This is very common with container loads, where you might build up purchase orders over time rather than having one purchase order for the container. And so then that becomes a real problem of manipulating and bouncing around that paperwork when you are doing the receipt. So again, with a good warehouse management system, you would be able to combine that work for those purchase orders for a container onto one document that you can receive against. This is often called an ASN, or an advanced shipping notice, or a delivery. But the idea is you're now just working off one document on your mobile device, rather than having to bounce around multiple pieces of paper trying to figure out what it is that you've just received. So the ability to present information to the user in a really clear way is one of the key benefits of a warehouse system. Now, it still works on paper. It's just more time consuming and potentially more prone to error if you receive the wrong things against the wrong PO. One of the other sources is a blind receipt. So this is someone just bought something, you know, without a purchase order, and say, here's some stock. Now, some businesses, you know, don't particularly use purchase orders, and they just kind of buy things on a credit card, and the stock comes in and you've got to receive it. So if you don't have a document to receive it against, that is called a blind receipt. Essentially, it's just an adjustment that just goes into the system to bring that stock in. Warehouse transfers, of course, if you move stock between multiple warehouses. Sales returns is obviously a key thing. They're the most time-consuming and ugliest form of receiving. Warranty and repairs, where you get stock back and you've got to go through a warranty claim process. Sometimes you just find stock in the warehouse that isn't on the system and you need to bring it in. So these are the typical sources of inbound stock, and you just simply need to be able to handle, have a process within your business that can handle each of those different scenarios. So one of the things that I find is that you will get a lot of people, they'll have the purchase order process down pretty well pat. But then these other things, what happens is if they don't happen enough, or if the process isn't worked out, this is when people start to get into trouble, because you get people in the warehouse and you know, maybe there's one experienced guy who knows how to do it, but sometimes things get left and they can sit for a while. So you need to have good processes and understand how you're going to actually manage each of these things within your system. Whether it's paper, whether it's a warehouse management system, doesn't matter. You need to have actually come through and make sure you've got each of these and that people know what they're doing. Sometimes receiving just gets away from you, and this is what I do. This is what my business is. I get called into warehouses and people are struggling. So this is just a couple of pictures of some different warehouses where the receiving dock is full because people they simply can't get the stock away because there's a whole host of reasons. For a warehouse to get this dysfunctional, there is usually some very, very deep issues within the business. Maybe they're simply buying too much. Maybe the processes are no good. Maybe the stock identification isn't very good, and so it just takes too long to receive anything. There's a million reasons. And you can get stock clogged in aisles. And that is never a good thing, because once you start staging stock on the aisles because you can't get it away, you can't receive it, then you can't access the stock that is actually in your racks. So you can't pick and you can't get it out. And this all starts to become a bit of a death spiral. So yeah, receiving is really important, and you need to make sure you keep control of it. Okay, so moving. So move it where? Well, if you're going to move it somewhere, then we're assuming that within your system, you have some way to locate that inventory and that you've got bin locations within the system. Now, if your stock is literally nowhere because you've got a system where you don't actually track bin locations, well, there are still ways you can operate, but I would say that bin locations are a critical function of any inventory management system. And certainly they're going to be there in any warehouse management system. So a lot of traditional systems had only a single bin per item, but some systems are multi-bin. But there are problems if you have a very simple multi-bin system, because one of the issues that you get, even if you've got multiple bins, which is what you ideally should have, because very rarely is an item in only one location. Most items are received and put away end up being put away into multiple locations, unless you only have a small amount of inventory. So single bin per item is okay, but of course the problem with that is, where's the rest of the stock if it's spread across multiple bins? If you track by multiple bins, you then have the problem of whenever you move it, you've got to reflect that in the system somewhere. So you add a whole bunch of overhead to your operation by going to multi-bin, unless you've got some really good processes for handling multiple bins. So I've certainly worked in warehouses where we had a paper-based system with multiple bins, and we had the ability to do the bin-to-bin moves, but people didn't do it. They would move stock around and then wouldn't track it properly. Managing without bins, you can certainly do it. You can store things in family groups, which is a very common, it's kitchen pantry management. Essentially, all of the spices are there and the flour and cooking goods are there, and so you sort of organize things, group together in logical order. You go to that area and you find the item, wherever it is within that area in the warehouse. You can put things in item code order. That is a terrible way to do it, but people do. And the problem with putting things in item code order, or family groups for that matter, is that your stock levels fluctuate. You bring on new item codes and suddenly you've got to shove them in the middle somewhere. And of course, they don't fit. So managing without bins with some sort of a casual structure becomes really problematic as your stock levels and everything change over time. One of the things that you can do to kind of overcome this is set up some pick faces and use a Cardex system, which is essentially where you track one single bin per item. That becomes your pick face. That's where you want to pick it from. And then you have a card on that pick face where you note down all of the reserve stock locations. So then when you pick and your pick face is empty, you can then take that card, go to one of those reserve stock locations, bring the stock forward, put it into your pick face, cross that location off the card, hopefully, and then stick it back in. So that's a very practical way to run. If you don't have a warehouse management system, you've got one location per item. That's a pretty practical way to do things. What often happens, though, is that the stock is Bob knows where, right? Bob's your receiving guy, your key storeman. He put it away. He manages the warehouse. He just simply knows where everything is. And you can get people with incredible memories who work in warehouses all the time. But of course, when Bob is not there because he's sick or is on holiday, you can have real trouble, and you get people wandering around warehouses trying to find things, wasting huge amounts of time because the stock isn't tracked by location. I'm going to accelerate my pace a bit here. so that I just tripped through a few things. But really, there's your key different types of locations are your pick faces and your bulk reserve. They're the ones that you are really putting your attention on managing, so that you've got a pick face where you pick from, and then reserve stock. That looks like a beautiful warehouse, but sometimes you get warehouses where people are wandering around going, where is it? All right. If you're going to go to location management, then you need to set up a bin numbering system. So that bin numbering system, this is my preference, and there are as many opinions on bin numbering as there are warehousing people. But here's my thoughts for what it's worth. Your bin numbering needs to be structured. You're going to have something that's going to indicate the zone or area of the warehouse. People commonly have pallet racking and some shelving. So you need to know, is this location in the shelving or is it in the pallet rack area? Then you're going to have a rack number, then a bay number, then a level, and then a slot. So within a bay of pallet racking, for example, you get 2 pallets. So you're going to have 2 slots within that for the 2 pallets. If you had long span shelving, that could be 6 or 8 slots within a bay. Sometimes you will get a sub-slot. So a sub-slot is when you then break that down to even further and finer levels. And I'll show an example of that in a minute. You also need to have a separator. So in this case here in the location label, there is a dash between each of the elements. So you have the rack number, the bay number, the level number, and then the slot number. I prefer numeric instead of alphanumeric because with separators, it's visually distinct. And whenever you use alphabetic characters in a location, in a bin number, then what that means is someone's got to do a translation and figure out exactly what number J represents or H, and it just doesn't come as easily as a numeric code. Here's an example of that in action in pallet racking, where we've got the labeling, and of course we've got a barcode on it so we can scan it to confirm the location in the warehouse system. And because scanners typically can't scan up into the high locations, then if you've got to pull a pallet down, you need to repeat the location barcodes lower down on the rack, and that's what you're seeing there. Here's an example of some location numbering where we've got subslots. So here is long span. So you can see here, A is like the zone, H is the rack, O5 is the bay, A is the level. Alphanumeric, not a fan of that, but anyway, people do it. And then 2 numbers here for a subslot to denote the level and then the position along the bay. So you can see that's 0, 4, 1, 4, 2, 4, representing sub-levels and sub-positions. So this is position 3, position 4, position 5. All right, moves. So once we've got over the bin location management, then we've got various different types of moves. The primary one, where after we receive it, we're going to put it away. Then you get a bin-to-bin item move, where you simply need to move a certain amount of item from one spot to another for whatever reason. Maybe you're just trying to free up space to allow you to put something else in there. Then you might have a bin-to-bin entire contents move. This is useful on shelving where you've got multiple items within a bin, and you want to pick up that entire contents and move it to another bin. The license plate move. The license plate is a particular functionality that's used in warehouse management systems where you apply it's like a reference number or a license plate that identifies all of the stock on a particular carrier. So commonly this is a pallet. So a pallet will have a license plate on it, and it might have 10 things on that pallet, and you can use that license plate and to move it. So you just go one scan of the license plate, and now it knows what I'm picking up, and I can move that into another location. Replenishment is the move where the system directs you to pick things up from bulk reserve locations and bring it forward into a pick face. And then that can be manual or system directed. And then the last one is the planned move. This is where you want to move stock around the warehouse for a particular reason. You might need to empty out a rack because you're going to tear it down, or you're going to reconfigure it in some way, or add some new racking, or you're doing a a product slotting exercise where you want to move the stock around your warehouse to move the faster moving product towards the front and the slower moving product towards the back. So those are the different types of moves that you're typically doing within a warehouse. Replenishing. So with replenishing, you have a dedicated bin location for a particular item. And that will vary. That could be the size of a pallet, or it could be a pick location within long span, or even in shelving. And you will often have different pick faces for the same item for different units of measure. So you might have a pallet pick face for a fast moving item, but you've got an e-commerce picking zone where you've got a few cartons of that item. And so you'll have multiple pick faces. You want to have a min-max level on those pick faces. So that will either be something you can track in the system, or you will need to do it manually somehow. And you can do all of this manually. It's just more time consuming. And of course, you've got different types of racking that are going to be where your pick faces are going to be. And I'll show you some. CLS stands for carton live storage. That's those roller racks. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. So directed manual replenishment, replenish or pay the lazy tax. If you don't replenish, then what happens is you end up picking out of the bulk reserve down the back of the warehouse. So you can run a warehouse without pick faces, but pick faces are a tool to make your warehouse more efficient, because you move in bulk with a replenishment move to save all of the time of going, 100 times to that fast moving product, which you've inadvertently put at the back of your warehouse. Now, in designing your pick faces, the Pareto principle is your friend, developed by or really noticed by Vilfredo Pareto, who noticed that 80% of the wealth in Italy was held by 20% of the people. The same thing applies to your stock. The items in your warehouse, you will find, if you draw a Pareto curve, that 80% of your sales come from 20% of your 20% of the items that you sell. And it's really true. Now, this is people kind of know this intuitively. Everyone knows the concept of fast movers and slow movers. But when you actually, if you do the analysis and you actually look at your sales and you pull all this apart, you'll find some extraordinary information. Sometimes it's even better than that. I've certainly had people where the number of items sold is less than, the top selling items are less than 15%, are less than 20%. So I had an example recently where 15% of the sales represented, 15% of the items represented 80% of the sales. And even the top 3% of items made up 50% of the sales. So what that means is that 50% of your picking comes from 3% of your items, and therefore those super fast movers you need to pay a lot of attention to, because if those are at the back of your warehouse, you will be wasting a lot of time. So this activity of going through and doing your Pareto analysis and working out the best way to store those products, that is called product slotting. Now, this is a Pareto curve. So the one I just mentioned, so this is our 80% of sales coming from 15% of our items, about 400 odd items, 2,600 items sold in total. So this here is your fast moving zone where you will be doing 80% of your picking from these items. So you need to give those items a lot of attention. This category over here, this is often called the long tail. So the long tail is 80% of your items that make up only 20% of your sales. So in terms of the physical activity in the warehouse, this is 20%. But it is a lot of physical stock still in your warehouse. So you need to use this understanding of how your products move to set up your warehouse so that you optimize for the top 20%. And it's not that this is unimportant, right? These are still important items. You're selling them. They may be critical. People want them, all right? Because maybe when they buy 10 of these, they also need to buy one of those. So, that's where it can end up being important. Or you've got a full size range of a product. Medium and large sell in abundant volume, but the extra large and the extra small sell only a few. So you got to figure that out, and you've got to manage it. The other thing that will happen is this is dynamic. Things will move between fast moving and slow moving all the time. That's fashion, right? So new products come in, everyone's buying them, and then next season nobody wants them. So you've got to quit it and get it out. So this needs constant attention and constant revision of your product slotting. Here's some carton life storage, the roller ranks that I mentioned. These are fantastic for that kind of middle range of items which sell in reasonable volume but are not your fastest of fast moving. So what we're looking at here, this on the left here this is the front face of the racking, and this is the back. So you replenish from the back, you get automatic stock turnover, and you pick from the front. These are fantastic. It is expensive, but if these are right for your business, these are a really, really good way of storing product. Sometimes you will replenish these. Sometimes these lanes will store the entirety of your stock. And so you're going to purchase and you're going to put away, and the stock will just live in this carton life storage, so you don't have to do the replenishment. They have the big advantage that they do the automated stock rotation, which is really important, and each lane actually holds quite a bit of stock. And of course, you could have 2 or 3 lanes for an item if it was a faster moving and sold in volume. But the idea behind carton life storage is that you're going to put in cartons and you're going to pick units out of it. So you'll notice all of these here. These are all open. These are all open units. So that's just a bit of example of replenishment in action combined with the racking. Okay, let's get on to picking. This is where all of the attention goes. People are really obsessed with picking. Now, fair enough, because it is the most labor consuming activity in the warehouse. You go into any warehouse, they'll have a small team, maybe 10 or 20% of the workforce are doing receiving and put away, and 80% of the workforce are picking and packing and shipping the goods. So, I mean, that varies depending upon the nature of your business, but certainly in the e-commerce world, picking is very, very labor intensive. And so that's where it gets a lot of attention. So I'm going to contrast here traditional picking with modern picking. So traditional picking happens in the traditional areas of the supply chain. This is manufacturers and wholesalers and retailers, right? You think of the big Coles and Woolies grocery warehouses, which are enormous, and they have hundreds of people in them, and it's full of guys wandering around, driving around on pallet movers with 2, sometimes even up to 3 pallets on them, case picking and building pallet loads that are going to go out to the supermarkets. That's a very traditional form of warehousing. Often paper-based, usually single order pick, because you can't multi-order pick a large order. You've got to pick one at a time. And or if you have smaller orders, you might be using a batch pick and assembly process. So this is where you pick multiple orders, but you essentially just consolidate all the quantities for the different items together onto a pick list. You go and pick that, but then you've still got to repick that as you to actually assemble the individual orders that are in that batch. It's a great way to pick, but and the batch pick is really quick, but the assembly operation can be quite slow because you've got to find stuff, and there's now no locations on it. So it's good. It's better than individually picking each order, but it's not a perfect process either. The other comment is your warehouse layout and the way you've slotted the products in the warehouse, that always sets the baseline productivity for your warehouse, regardless of whether it's a traditional paper-based operation or whether you've got the best warehouse management system. What's physically going on is also incredibly important. In modern picking, you'll get traditional sorts of warehousing, the traditional supply chain, using a WMS to drive efficiency, but you'll still get a lot of single order picking and maybe a bit of batch picking. You'll get more sophisticated materials handling equipment. People will be using order pickers where you rise up with the goods to pick. You might get some automation coming in. There are robotized forklifts that move stocks around. There are automatic storage and retrieval systems. There's a lot going on in the materials handling equipment world to improve the productivity of order picking within a warehouse. And of course, once you have the technology of warehouse system, you can do multi-order picking that allows you to pick and sort to order, either on a pallet or a trolley or whatever is going on there. And this is where really we're stepping into the e-commerce realm, where because the order size is small, you need to be able to pick multiple orders at a time. So there are two main ways of doing that. One is the multi-order pick, where you pick and sort to order. One is a multi-batch pick, where you pick and sort to a batch of orders, and then you've got to do a put to order process or an outsort process at the end of that, which we often see in a put wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you something. Where is it? There it is. I'm just going to show you this Dematic. This is a modern automation system. This is a Dematic put wall. And you'll see what's going on here. Some stock has been picked, right? And it's come down a conveyor, and you've got these guys who obviously work for Dematic, and they're not storemen. You've got these guys who are sorting this stock into a put wall. So you've got one guy on one side who's sorting out the orders, and what you'll see on the other side of that, someone is then taking the order once it's completed, right? You see this guy down on the left over here, and we're going to go and see him in just a moment. Come on, here we go. All right, so you see he is now, the system is indicating to him that order has now been completed, and he confirms it. So he's putting just the contents for a single order in that tub. That tub's going to go down some conveyors, and it's going to go and be presented to someone who is going to pack those orders into a shipping carton and ship them. So that is a modern automation system, but essentially what they're doing is they're doing a kind of a multi-batch pick, right? They're picking stock. It's for a pick wave for that put wall, and then it's going to go to someone, and then they're going to do this this put to order process, and then it gets sent into a tub and then goes off to a packer. Great if you can get it with all of that automation, but that can potentially be costing you millions of dollars. But you can do it with a warehouse management system. At least you can do it with our warehouse management system. And that is where you kind of want to be when you're in the e-commerce world. So here's a multi-order pick trolley. This is, now you're going to have something like this if you want to pick multiple orders at one time. So each one of those trays might contain one order, or in a multi-batch pick, each one of those trays would hold 5 or 6 orders, because there's only 1 or 2 units per order. Other forms of automation, we've all seen these Amazon robotics, which are now just everywhere because Amazon bought the company and then took it off the market. But there's a million copycat products like that now. I'm not a super fan of them compared to some of the other more modern automation systems that are out there. This is a vertical lift, which is actually probably one of the cheapest forms of automatic storage and retrieval systems that you can get. These are pretty efficient, but they're not as quick. But they're cheaper, right? But they're not as quick as some of the more modern automated systems. And the one that is really taking the world by storm at the moment is this AutoStore. And I'll just show you quickly a little video that shows what this AutoStore system is doing. So what they're going to demonstrate here is how much they can condense the storage of traditional shelving into the AutoStore systems, which actually just takes all of that stock, everything gets put into a tub, and then the tubs are stacked on top of each other in a 3D matrix. And then you've got these, input and output stations for the receiving and the put away and for the pickers. You've got these little robots running around on top. This is all automated. It's magic stuff. And you see they reach down and they pick up a tub, and then they drop it down. It presents to a user, and they might scan it, or it's going to have a visual light indicator. They're getting some instructions on the screen of what they're picking. Obviously, there's a label printer there. They might be doing some tub labeling and stuff as well. And so this would be, if you think about that dramatic thing that I just showed you with the put wall, this is the kind of thing that where you are going to be picking out of this into a tub. It's going to go off to someone who's manning a put wall and is doing all of the individual order sorting. These could also be a pick and put to order process as well, right? But it's going to go off to a packing station after that. That is all very, very clever stuff. So automation is going gangbusters at the moment, but it is a high volume solution. If you don't have the order volume to support it, to pay the millions of dollars that it costs to put these systems into place, and it's not just that, it's the engineers you need to employ to keep it under control and make sure it keeps working, and the hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in maintenance costs that go with it as well. So it's a big business solution. It's great, but it's a big business solution. Okay. Pack and ship. So I'm going to because I want to leave time for questions, so I'm going to kind of wrap this up sort of pretty quickly. So just some things around packing. In e-commerce world, it should be separated from the picking process, and that's generally what I see in most warehouses. You have packing benches, you have people who pick and people who pack. You can pick and pack your own orders. You can certainly do that, but you're probably going to run into some congestion issues if you do that. So it's good to have people who pack, and generally picking is a slower process than packing, so you will often have more pickers than packers. It's going to depend upon the technology and the nature of your orders and all sorts of things. If you're using that multi-batch pick process that I was talking about before, where you're picking and sorting to order, that outsort process, you might want to combine that with the packing process. We certainly do that. But at a packing bench, you need really good ergonomics. You need to standardize your shippers. When you are, one of the things you're going to be doing during your packing process, certainly with a warehouse system, right? Not necessarily if you're running a paper system, but with a warehouse system, you're going to have an integration with a freight system, and you want to get your shipping labels printed out from that integration as you pack the orders. You do not want to have a whole bunch of, packed orders, 50 packed orders and 50 shipping labels that you then have to try and apply. That is a recipe for putting the wrong shipping label on the wrong box and shipping it to the wrong place. Here's a typical packing station. So this was a design I did in 3D, and then this is what it ended up looking like in practice. And they're doing a multi-batch outsort here, where they're sorting this tub of picked stock into these individual orders. Okay, counting, really, really important. So there are two things with counting where this falls into, two different types of counting that you want to do. You want to do a cycle count process to fix the discrepancies. People go somewhere to pick something, it's not there, right? And so either they pick from another location if you have more of that stock, or the order is going to go out short or get held. So you need to be able to do cycle counts to do discrepancy corrections. You need to investigate the source of the error. Was it a problem in receiving? Was it a problem in picking? Did you send out too much stock? Did someone break it and not write it off? There's a million reasons why you might have a shortage, but you need to actually identify what's going on within your warehouse and correct those processes to make sure that you make those stock discrepancies at a minimum. The other side of counting is the stock take and cyclic stock take process, which really is a housekeeping function. Now, we all know about the traditional annual stock take, which is driven by the accountants, right? Traditionally, that would have been the only way to value your stock for accounting reporting. Now, what tends to happen is people want to do cyclic stock taking, so that we do a partial stock take that you do a little bit each day, and you do small counts, but over time you might count the warehouse, at least once a year, but maybe 3 or 4 times a year. And you might want to do that by location. So you just select a physical section of the warehouse and you pick that. Or you might want to do it by items in a traditional ABC analysis where you pick your faster moving items, count your faster moving items more frequently than your slower moving items. All right, finally, and just to wrap this up, thoughts on optimization and mastery of your warehouse. I think there are 7 things that you need to get right when running your warehouse. Process, really important. Layout sets the physical baseline, right, for your warehouse. Layout and the product slotting. Materials handling equipment can have a massive impact on efficiency and storage density and selectivity within your warehouse. All of these physical things have a huge impact on the underlying productivity of your capacity of your warehouse. The system obviously supports the process. If you have paper, you are limited in the processes, the sophistication of the processes you can apply in your warehouse. And let's not forget the people or the management aspects of the way you run the warehouse. All of these things go together to add up to an efficient and optimized warehouse. The last thought I'm going to leave you with is, well, here we go. These 3 things I really want to say. Process rules everything, but discipline rules process. So that first slide, one of the first early slides I showed where I talked about process and discipline, it's not just about the process, it is about the discipline of executing those processes. So you can have good processes that people don't understand or that don't follow, and it will all turn to poo. And that's because culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, I've personally been eaten by culture in terms of my efforts in the work that I do. The culture within a business and how amenable people are to actually doing the right thing and working the processes properly. That culture that you build within your business goes a long way towards making everything else work. And I just can't stress that enough. If you don't have the right culture, you don't have the right management, you don't have the right team who think the right way and act the right way in place, then it's almost like nothing else matters. Right, I hope you found that webinar helpful as just a very rapid-fire overview of how to improve the operations in your warehouse. If you would like to go deeper into that and perhaps work with me, by all means, just give me a call. My phone number's there. You can find out more about the work that I do on logisticshelp.com, which is my work as a logistics consultant, or logisticscloudco.com, which is the website for the warehouse management system. You can find me on LinkedIn under the Logistics Optimizer, or on Twitter if you do that sort of thing at Logistics Andrew. So the 2 main areas that I work in are on warehouse management system implementation, and that can be a standardized implementation with the cloud system under Logistics Cloudco brand, or it can be a custom implementation, which is really aimed at large businesses. The underlying product behind Logistics Cloudco WMS is a product called Next WMS, and that is a product WMS that runs some very, very large logistics businesses in Australia and overseas. So it's a massively capable product that will suit a business of any size, even a global business with warehouses all around the world. If you want some consulting, then I do warehouse design work. I work on process improvement and inventory management improvement. So I do all of those business improvement operations around logistics. There's a little diagram there, example of the kind of warehouse design outputs that I produce. And people have found those incredibly helpful to visualize the warehouse before actually going and building something. So that's about all for now. So I will hopefully talk to you soon. If you call me and I don't pick up, then just leave a message and I'll call you back as soon as I can. All right. Well, I hope to speak to you at some point in the future. Thank you.